Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to tackle a huge question. What happens to art when it moves from a dark cave to a bright, shiny museum? We're going to dig into this through the really fascinating ideas of philosopher Maurice Blanchot and take a journey from art's very first spark all the way to its modern home.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the birth of art itself. Then we'll imagine a world with no museums at all. From there, we'll get into the museum's big contradiction, explore this idea Blanchot calls museum sickness, and then wrap up with his really beautiful concept of art's eternal beginning.
All right, our story starts deep, deep underground, tens of thousands of years ago. It's right here in the total darkness that Blanchot says we can find the real birth of art. He's really pushing us to think beyond just, the image of a bison on a wall. What was that experience actually like? What did it feel like to be there at the exact moment that art came into the world?
To make his point, Blanchot uses the incredible cave paintings of Lascaux. He doesn't see them as just, decorations. He talks about their commanding presence, a kind of power that was born from absolute darkness, only ever seen by the flickering light of a torch.
See, this is the key. This wasn't art about the world. For Blanchot, this was the creation of a world. It was this singular, intense experience that you just can't separate from its dark, underground home. It happened once, right there, in that specific place.
So let's just stay in that world for a minute. A world where art only existed in its original spot, long before anyone even had the idea for a gallery. Before museums, art was just part of the fabric of life. It was a piece of a ceremony, a force you encountered in a specific moment. It wasn't some object you admired from a distance behind a velvet rope.
So the bottom line is, the meaning of the art was tied to everything around it. The darkness, the ritual, the people who were there. It was a living, breathing event, not some static object on a wall.
And this, right here, brings us to the central conflict in Blanchot's thinking. What happens when we decide we need to save this art? What happens when the museum shows up?
The museum's goal is a good one, right? Let's preserve these incredible works for everybody, for all time. But in doing so, it creates this massive contradiction that, it changes the art forever.
And here's that transformation in action. The artwork gets pulled out of its original life and is given a totally new one. As Blanchot puts it so perfectly, what was once a god in a temple, a living part of a belief system, it just becomes a statue, an object to be studied and admired for its form.
So the first thing the museum does is preservation. It rescues the work from being lost to time, which, is an amazing achievement.
But in that process, it has to isolate the art. It strips away all the context, the ritual, the darkness. The entire world that gave the art its original meaning is just gone.
And by preserving it and isolating it, the museum fundamentally transforms it. That cave painting, it's no longer a cave painting. Now it's a historical artifact. The temple god is now a sculpture. Its very essence has been changed.
Now, this transformation doesn't just happen to the art. It profoundly affects us, the viewers. And this leads to a really fascinating condition that Blanchot dives into. He calls it museum sickness. It's this idea that our desire to know everything, to categorize and understand art intellectually, actually distances us from its raw, immediate power. It's like we gain knowledge, but we might be losing the wonder.
Think about it. When you walk through a museum, you're almost trained to see art as just one piece in this giant puzzle of art history. You look at a Renaissance painting, and you immediately compare it to the one next to it. You trace influences, you analyze brushstrokes, and you fit it into a neat little timeline.
Blanchot says that, in a way, the ideal museum contains all art from all time, all just there, present at once. And this creates this endless conversation between artworks that were never ever meant to meet, making everything part of one giant continuous story.
But here's the brilliant twist. This isn't just some story about loss. For Blanchot, this very act of dislocation, this sickness, actually reveals the most fundamental truth about what art really is.
By detaching art from its original job, whether that was religious or ritualistic or whatever, the museum allows it to exist purely as art for the very first time. It's been set free. And here we are, at the heart of it all. Blanchot believes the greatest art isn't about its origin point way back in the past. It's about its constant ability to be new, to represent what he calls the youth of what is always beginning.
So this is what he means by art's rebirth. By taking art out of time, the museum makes it timeless. And because it's timeless, every single time a new person looks at it, the art can be born all over again. It has a perpetual birth in the gaze of each new viewer.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to take with you. The next time you walk through a museum and you stand in front of a centuries-old painting, just ask yourself, are you looking at a relic from the past, the end of its story, or are you there to witness its beginning?